$45 billion in security deposits are being held up nationwide. And that's why State Representative Marvin Pendarvis and other notable politicians are supporting a renter stimulus plan. The state representative explains the plan to me in this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. State Representative Marvin Pendarvis, welcome back to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Man, it's always good to be on with you, Quintin. It's been an interesting year. I think we've spoken once or twice. A lot's happened since we last spoke, but I appreciate the work that you do. You are a valued asset in the Charleston community, and I'm always honored when I can have a conversation with you about the pressing issues of the day.
Yes, sir, and I really do appreciate that, State Representative. And obviously, your Twitter bio says this: proud husband, father, litigation attorney, South Carolina State Representative, dreamer by day. What are you dreaming right now?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I'm dreaming for a day, honestly. I'm dreaming for good health for my family. I'm thankful to God that we've been able to weather the pandemic. So I certainly am thankful for that. And I'm dreaming that we'll continue to be prosperous going into the new year. But I'm dreaming about those who can't do for themselves. I'm dreaming about those who aren't as fortunate, those who have lost their job, those who have lost their house, those who need the assistance in the government to work for them in some way that it hasn't been in some time. And so I'm dreaming that we can really come together, local, state, and national elected officials, and come up with something that helps the American people, something that they've needed. It's been a trying year for all of us. And I think we have to do a better job of making sure that we're responsive to people's needs and being able to meet them where they are and come up with policy solutions that can address their needs in a meaningful way. So that's what I'm dreaming of.
How do you meet them where their needs are?
Well, you have to understand, Quintin, this pandemic has really ripped the Band-Aid off of many issues that have plagued us for some time. We see that housing insecurity is a real thing. We see that with the mounting evictions that's happening across the country. We see that people have lost jobs and there's real job insecurity, and that the unemployment rate has risen. And while it's fluctuated over some time as some jobs have been able to, so some sectors have been able to rebound, there's still many people that are out of work. We see it when it comes to the health disparities that are out there. We know in this pandemic that there are people who are disproportionately affected. We're thankful that there's a vaccine that's out there, but at the end of the day, we have to ensure that people's their health needs are being addressed. And so it's really a comprehensive, or I say a myriad of things that are wrong that we have to do a better job of addressing. And this pandemic has shown us that we've not been intentional with that for some time. And it's going to take all of us to really get to the point where people feel better about where they are. People feel better about the position they're in. If people feel like they have access and accessibility and affordability when it comes to many of the things that they need, and that's going to really impact their quality of life.
What is the quality of life in your district?
Well, it ranges. I think we're a working class district. We're a district that is, full of blue collar workers, and we have a number of professionals. I think we're a district with a number of established people who've been here for some time. As the Charlestonians say, a lot of binyas. And so we also have some people who've moved here for job opportunities, recent college graduates. So we have a nice mix. I'm biased in saying this, but I feel like we have the best district in the state because we have a nice mixture of young and old. We have a nice mixture of white collar, blue collar, professional, working class people. But there's also a segment of our district that's struggling. And I'm not turning a blind eye to that. And that's something that I recognize. And so, as an elected official, I think it's my responsibility to ensure that I bridge the gap and that I ensure that the same access and opportunity that's available in the northern end of my district is available in the southern end of my district.
Yes, sir.
And it's my job to bring resources to the people that need it and try to figure out a way that we all can move forward and ensure that the tenets of what the American dream is available to us.
What are the resources that your people need on the southern end of the city, and what are the resources the people on the northern end of the city need?
I mean, it varies, Quinn. I mean, I can get into the specifics, but at the end of the day, my district ranges from southern end of North Charleston all the way up to Somerville, and so just different cities, different areas, different needs. At the on the southern end, there's a distressed area. It's no secret. It's an area that needs investment. It's an area that needs adequate and affordable housing. It's an area that needs access to food because it's a food desert. It's an area that needs quality health care access. It's an area that we need to ensure that we are providing quality education and making sure that we're able to provide that access to the people that live there. It's an area that needs infrastructure and improved transit and ensuring that we are providing the environment where people can be able to flow freely. So the issues are endless. And I don't say that to paint this dreary picture, because there's a lot of progress. There's a lot of opportunity and promise in that area, but it has its challenges. And I acknowledge that we the people who there understand it, and we're working toward a better path forward.
And you talk about path forward. Let me talk to you about the open letter that is calling for a renter stimulus plan. It includes you and a lot of list of notable other dignitaries. It says this: after many months of a delay, a federal stimulus is finally moving forward. But this does not mean our work is done. 600 is not enough, and many Americans understandably are worried. That's why we, a bipartisan group of city and state elected officials, are fighting to create a 45 billion renter stimulus at a local level that could put an average of 1,400 back into the households of American renters and 800 more than the recent stimulus checks have promised. So where's this money going to come from?
Well, you have to understand, Quinn, as I mentioned before, we are in a crisis when it comes to evictions. And so this is an opportunity for us to put more money back into people's pockets. There's $45 billion that are in deposits from security deposits across the country. We have a potential to unlock that, potentially putting $1,400 back into people's pockets. That's important when you take into account the conversation surrounding stimulus package. And while I was very pleased to see that Congress passed a recent stimulus act and being able to put $600 that's being proposed in their conversations within the last 24 hours, that could potentially be up to $2,000. But that's a good thing, but it's not enough. And I think the Housing Coalition has already stated that we're going to need a $100 billion infusion into the housing industry to really address the needs of the people here through that have kind of manifested themselves throughout this pandemic. And so the stimulus package is the way for us to say that cities and states can act and not wait for the federal government. While we wait for Congress to decide what they're going to do to give a relief to the American people, cities can take action now. The city of Atlanta, the city of Cincinnati, these are places that have already come out and said, we are going to address this need. And so here's how it works. As I said before, there's $45 billion that's locked up in security deposits throughout the country. We know that when you go and you sign a lease at a place and you're paying rent, generally you're paying a security deposit. And more times than not, that security deposit amounts to 1 month's rent. And so what you have an opportunity to do is allow that person as an alternative to being able to put a security deposit down. They can pay a low cost deposit insurance. And that can be as low as the price of a cup of coffee per month. And so it allows people to keep more money in their pocket. It protects the landlord because it requires those renters, who claim the stimulus to be able to replace that cash deposit with that affordable alternative like the low deposit insurance. And it also helps the tenant because they can, again, use that money for bills, and use it for emergency expenses, paying down college loans, and even next month's rent. So it's a real opportunity that we have here. I'm imploring the city of Charleston, Mayor Tecklenburg, the city of North Charleston, Mayor Summit, and surrounding municipalities to really consider it. I think it's something that ought to be done, and I think it's something that if we do something and we take this approach, we'll find ourselves being able to unlock the potential. It's not really going to be have an impact on the city, right? This isn't money that the city is putting up. It's already unlocking money that's there. The tenants already paying these security deposits anyway when they sign that lease. And so all this is saying is lets them put some of that money, a very small portion of that money, toward deposit insurance that protects the landlord in the case of a default. So that they have that protection and they feel good about their investment, because at the end of the day, we want to protect landlords, but more importantly, it protects the tenant, who are in the most vulnerable positions, and they can have that money that could stay in their pocket, that could be the difference between being in a place or being homeless. And so it's about protecting people. It's about meeting them where they are and trying to provide relief while we're in this national gridlock on policy.
And what is a typical security deposit in your district?
I don't know the exact number of what it typically is. I can tell you in my district, I believe in North Charleston, average rents range from maybe $1,100, $1,500 for the average rent. So if you think about if a security deposit is generally going to be a 1 month rent, I mean, you're talking over $1,000 of what a security deposit is likely to be. And in some cases, security deposits can be a couple months rent, but in a lot of cases, it's 1 month's rent that you get back on the back end when the lease is up and everything in the house is up to par, and then you get that back. But let's not wait and allow it to be on the back end. How about we do something on the front end, protect the landlords in the process, but while we're in this pandemic, provide some immediate relief to people who need it the most.
How many landlords in your district are on board with this plan?
Well, I haven't polled them, right? This is something that is a new development. It just really came across my desk this week, and I was, eager to sign on to it. I imagine there are a number of landlords who might have some objection to it. I've spoken to one landlord who's a good friend of mine. He and I were in high school together, who has some concerns, and like anything, there's room for disagreement. But my argument to them is the landlords are protected. They're protected by the deposit insurance, and so going through this third party that has the insurance, and it protects them like any insurance, right? If there's a loss, they get that payment for that rent if there's some kind of default that occurs. But we have to change our mindset, right? And a lot of times it takes us to shift our thinking and look at it from the frame of who's being impacted the most, and who's going to be in a lot of these vulnerable states. And I think if we do it that way, this is something that's going to really protect people who need it, but it's also going to protect landlords who are also being impacted as well, because they're protected knowing that their investment is still going to be there, and they'll be protected in the case of default with this deposit insurance.
And you talk about obviously vulnerability. Who is it going to be? Black, Latinos, Caucasians?
Well, a lot of tenants are people who are African American, or people who are, I'll say this, a lot of the victims of the eviction crisis are disproportionately African American, disproportionately low income, disproportionately come from marginalized communities. So these are the people who are being impacted the most. These are the people who, obviously we're trying to target as far as getting relief. So that they can be players in the economy, right? We want these people to have money that's in their pocket that they can use to ensure that their affairs are in order at home, but the leftover that they can be active participants in the economy and really get us going. So I think if we look at it holistically, this is something that benefits the state, and it's something that is just good public policy. It really will have a great impact long term on our economic standing.
And what is the economic standing in your district?
Well, as I said at the beginning, right? It's a district that has different factions. So, there are a number of people who are struggling. I mean, there's no secret about that. And there are people who are doing well. I think, we are a good mixture. I look at us as a working class district. That's how I would describe it. We're a working class district with people of many different needs, and trying to make the best life that they can with whatever they have that's available to them. It is my job as their district representative to provide as many resources as I can, to make that life that more accessible, make that life that more affordable, and make that life easier for them long term.
And what other concerns are you hearing from these landlords about this?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I've not really talked to any landlords. I've talked to one landlord. He voiced his concern. He thinks that the application of it may be a bit unorthodox, and I understand his concern. Right, I'm willing to hear from any landlords, but I think we have to have a conversation. And there's a reason why there's a national push for this. We're in the middle of a pandemic. People need relief. They need relief now. And so we have to be creative and innovative in the ways that we think about that relief. And this is something that doesn't have any cost on the city. This is something that the landlords ultimately will protect it. And this is something that, again, landlords have that security deposit to kind of hedge against anything that may happen throughout the term of the lease. And if they get their rent throughout the lease term, and there's some issues with the apartment complex, they keep that security deposit. Let's just give it at the beginning, right? Let's make sure that we're talking security deposit. We're not even talking rent. We're talking the security deposit that in most instances go back to the tenant anyway. And so all we're saying is let's provide that relief to them in a stimulus package now, protect the landlord if they fear that there may be some default down the road through some deposit insurance. And let's make sure that the people get the relief that they need.
And obviously, you talk about that landlord, that one landlord that you talked about, and he had a problem with obviously the application. What is that process like?
I mean, it varies, right? I mean, we have to create an ordinance here. We decide to do it in North Charleston. It really is pretty simple. Like if a tenant wants to elect to go and get deposit insured, I mean, if they want to elect to use the stimulus, then the landlord would go through this third party insurer that essentially provides security deposit insurance, so that the tenant is just paying a small premium per month. That could be $20, that could be $30, depending on whatever that premium amount is. And then, that is what ultimately protects the landlord. And so the landlord is essentially, if it got to a situation where there was a default, they would have to collect from the insurance company, just like anything. You file a claim.
Yeah. And that insurance company, is that the third party you're referring to?
Correct. It's a third party insurer. That's
okay.
Right.
And let me turn to Columbia. Obviously, there's a lot of people filing bills as we speak. What have you filed thus far?
I filed a number of bills, many of them related to housing, many of them related to economic development, many of them related to infrastructure. My package of bills are related to issues that affect people on a grassroots level. I've been a vocal housing advocate, so I've got a number of pieces of legislation that just really try to curb evictions and try to make the eviction laws in South Carolina more equitable, because they're very landlord friendly now. And so we just want to make it equitable, level the playing field in a lot of ways. So I've got some bills geared toward that based off of what we learned through the eviction tour over the past several months. I've got some economic empowerment bills. I've got some things that we filed with opportunity zones. I've got some things that we filed when it comes to incentives in the Department of Commerce. We've got a number of bills that have been filed. I'm excited about it, and I'll be releasing that package soon, and I'll be more than glad to come back on and talk about that in detail.
Sure, absolutely. And you talk about those evictions. How many of those have actually unfortunately happened in your district over the past couple of months?
I'm not sure. I don't know how many. I mean, I haven't tracked that data. I know that evictions continue to happen in North Charleston. It's a city that has a high rate of evictions. I can tell you that the evictions have spiked as a result of this pandemic. And so whatever numbers that I previously knew, that those numbers are probably double, triple in some instances. But I would imagine it's high. At the end of the day, they've been filed. I think now I'm pleased that there is some relief. There is a moratorium. That a moratorium has been extended to January 31st, and there's a likelihood that it will be extended even further when the Biden administration takes office.
Let me ask a simplistic question. How do you rewrite South Carolina's unjust landlord and tenant laws?
Well, you have to go through and make it more equitable. At the end of the day, the landlords are being, evictions are being used as a debt collection tool, and so they use it as this means of getting a debt and getting rent, which is not necessarily that what the law should be used for. Evictions are in cases where there's some kind of default or some kind of material breach of the contract, and landlords have exhausted the resources in order to, and then they're able to go ahead and pursue an eviction. But in many instances, a late payment, there's an eviction file. And I understand it's not all landlords. I get it. Landlords have a tough job. Many of them are small business people, and so they're trying to make ends meet themselves. But we have to do a better job of updating our law. It hasn't seen any substantial improvements since 1986. In 1986 is when it was passed. So we've never done anything to address the law. And I'm just hoping to do some minor things that just level the playing field and make it more favorable, not even more favorable, but just level the playing field for tenants and landlords alike.
And how do you level that playing field for the tenants when it comes to organizing?
I don't follow.
Tenant organizing.
Tenants are free to organize as they will. It's not. There are many tenants who have tenant associations. There are many places that have apartment complexes that may have a group of tenants that meet. And I don't know if there are any trade groups that exist locally, but I imagine they've got a voice. We're not a union state here, so they're not organized in that manner. But tenants have organized, because I've been part of conversations with many groups that are looking to do something about the landlord-tenant laws in South Carolina.
And how do you ensure a living wage for people in your district?
$15 an hour.
State Representative Marvin Pendarvis, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
It's always a pleasure. I appreciate you and what you do. And I pray that you and your family have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Take care, my friend.
Likewise.